Welcome Wargamers, my name is Doug from 2+ Tough, and today we are doing an in-depth review of the Start Collecting Daughters of Kane box that came out not too long ago, but I just now got around to doing it. And if you're new to these Start Collecting box reviews, essentially what we're doing is we're going to talk about what you literally get in the box, all the different optional builds that you have, and then we'll explore the different war scrolls, the options that you have at your disposal to really explore what you get, how you can use them, and then we'll have a discussion at the end here about kind of summing it all up. How do these models fit into the faction, and really drive home two questions. Is this a good start to this army? And secondly, does it reflect the army as a whole? Like, if I get this box, am I going to be surprised by what the rest of the faction looks like? So without further ado, let's dive into the contents of the Daughters of Kane Start Collecting box. Now, essentially in this box, you will get two complete kits. One is the shrine, the big machine you see there in the center, and also a unit of what we call the Snake Ladies, which are the Medusa, which can be built in one of two ways. Now, here's the thing about this box that makes it incredibly hard to review, is I'm going to pull up this picture on the screen here, is you can build it two distinct ways, and it gives you all of the hero options in the faction, depending on how you build it. So, you have the one option on the left, the Cauldron of Blood, the Hag Queen or Slaughter Queen, a Blood Rack Medusa, and 5 Medusa Blood Stalkers. Those are the girls with bows. The other option over here is the Blood Rack Shrine, which is now the Medusa, who's on top of the shrine, 1 Hag Queen, 1 Slaughter Queen on foot, 1 Avatar of Kane, who is the Rio de Janeiro statue over there, and 5 Medusa Blood Stalkers. Now, they do make it clear they have Bloodstalkers listed in both of these options, but these can also be built as Blood Sisters, which are the melee variant of the Snake Gals, who come on 40 mil bases. Now, with most of my videos, I find it pretty easy to dive right into, talking about how this gets you started in the faction in terms of most boxes give you, a hero and a base unit, like a battle line unit, and then something big or something cool, like a chariot or something like that. But this box is incredibly unique. There's no Start Collecting box for AOS quite the same. I guess Fire Slayers might be a close one, where what essentially GW did when they released Daughters of Kane is took one kit, that Cauldron, the big thing that everyone's riding on, and they broke it into several units. So for example, if you have the Blood Rack Shrine, which is the Medusa on top, their Medusa on top, where it kind of bumps off that statue of Kane with his arms out and the sword, well, that statue is now a singular model. You can still use him on the tabletop. And that goes doubly so for all of the Hag Queen and the Slaughter Queen who are with it. And so, again, you could have several options depending on how you want to build this thing out. And they are important options, because if you're just starting this faction, this is an easy point to build something that you won't use a whole lot later on. And so rather than me just kind of like, shooting from the hip and spitballing about how you should build this, and wasting your time about going into like literally every single possible configuration because there's so many, I decided to reach out to my buddy Chuck Moore, Strength Hammer on Twitter, who is an awesome person in the community. Go give him a follow. But I asked him because he is a Daughters of Kane player. He's been playing it for quite a while. Fantastic looking army. And I just absolutely appreciate his opinion. He's very encouraging for new folks. So I asked him, like, hey, what would you recommend to people who are looking to get started in this faction, specifically with this box? And so what he recommended, I'm going to read it right here. The box looks like a good way to start either a Medusa army, or if you have a more witch, elf, sister of slaughter styled army already, it's a good add-on value. If you are starting and you want to go snakes, then build the Blood Rack Shrine, and the melee snakes as they are battle line. Fantastic advice right there. The additional heroes and Avatar on foot are all good for Daughters of Kane armies, so consider them a bonus. If you don't want to go snakes, then put the Slaughter Queen, this one for your first Cauldron, or Hag Queen Cauldron, and build the snakes as you like to mix them into a more traditional horde force. And that is some fantastic advice. Then it's stuff, he touched on something that specifically I always do, which is if they give you a unit and it's a dual build, if one build is battle line, always go with that one, because as a new player, it's the first step you can start taking to kind of set yourself up for success when it comes to actually playing match play games, which require a hero and multiple battle line depending on how big a game you're playing. And so based on that advice, I'm going to go ahead and do a review of the units in this kit, honestly leaning towards the suggestions he made for starting a snake-focused army. When he says snake, he means the Medusa. Because if you want to do the horde-based, lots of witch elves and Sisters of Slaughter, that kind of stuff, it's going to require an immense amount of purchases outside this box. This is a horde army if you lean that direction. Or you can get, quite frankly, more value out of this specific set if you go the other direction and more towards elite snakes and that kind of stuff, Medusa units. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and walk through the war scrolls of his suggestions, and we'll take a look at this box from that value perspective, because I think bang for your buck, if you do want to focus on the witch elves, you might as well just buy the cauldron separately and then just spend your money only on witches, to be honest with you. Like he said, it's a good add-on if you have the coin, but I think you do get more mileage if you want to focus on building a Medusa-based army. So we're going to talk about the Blood Shrine and the configuration that he talked about, and then we're going to move into the Blood Sisters, which are the battle line version of the Medusa. I don't usually have to do this much preface when it comes to reviewing a Start Collecting box, but this is such a strange faction in how they packaged all the heroes in one kit that I kind of have to. A little preamble is required. Okay, when I'm doing these kinds of reviews, I always start off with the hero, the big centerpiece thing, because typically it's the heroes who set a lot of the synergies for the rest of the faction. Now, this is a little bit different than a lot of them because most Start Collecting boxes don't come with a hero that has what we call a bracket. So that is to say, some of these things have stars on their stats, and then you have to look down here at this table to see how much damage they've suffered throughout the game, and that tells you how much those values are worth. So for example, if you have a move of star, right, you're going to look how many wounds has the Bloodrack Shrine suffered. If it's 0 to 2, your movement is 6, and so on, and you can keep track of that on your own. Yeah, so we're going to jump into here. Bloodrack Shrine. We're focusing on Snake Ladies. Move is dash, but it starts at a 6-inch move, which is not terrible. It's a big ol' thing being pushed by, I don't know, hopes, dreams, and prayers. You got a wounds characteristic of 13 and a save of 5 up. Now, this army is not renowned for its better saves, at least on paper. And that's an important thing, is that in practice, they are very different than they are on paper, and we'll get to why in a little bit. Other useful stat, Bravery 8, probably won't come into play a whole lot, but it is there. Now, as far as missile weapons, we have the Bloodrack Stare. And when I do these profiles, if it says see below or it has a special rule, I just jump right to that to give it some context. And we'll scroll down here. Bloodrack Stare. Okay, has a range of 10, no matter what. When making a Bloodrack Stare attack, pick a unit that is visible to the Bloodrack Shrine and roll a dice for each model in that unit within range. For each roll of a 5 up, the unit suffers one mortal wound. Now, what that means functionally is if you crash this sucker into a horde unit and you shoot the unit that you are engaged with, again, it is a shooting attack, so it has to be whoever you're in combat with, you theoretically can do quite a bit. Now, of course, it's only on a 5 up. It's not going to be this sweeping, crazy attack. It's not the same thing as, say, the steam gun on the gyrocopter that I was so enthralled about when I did the Cities of Sigmar review, but it's there. I mean, it can do things. The fact that it attacks every single person in that unit within range, it gives it some horde fighting capabilities, and that's all you can really ask for. But that's the only profile that has a special rule associated with it down below. So now we're going to focus on the melee ones. The Tail of Serpents, range 2, d6 attacks, 4s to hit, 4s to wound. That's a pretty unimpressive stat line there. No rend and 1 damage. That's going to be your weight of dice attacks, but having a 2-inch range on a base that's so big is really, really nice. Next is Whisper Claw, 4 attacks, 4s to hit, 3s to wound, no rend and 1 damage again. Then there's the Bloodrack Spear, 2-inch range, 2 attacks, 3s to hit, 3s to wound, -1 rend and D3 damage. Now we're talking. That's a profile worth bragging about, I think. Maybe not for a hero, but I like 3 up, 3 up. It's easy to remember, and it's pretty darn effective. And then there are the Shrine Keeper's Goad Staves. 2-inch range, attack is a star, so it starts off at 6 and goes down from there. So we'll just say 6 attacks right now, even though it probably won't be that when you get into melee. 3s to hit, 3s to wound, no rend, and 1 damage. Based on those kind of profiles, I can tell you this is not a melee monster. It's not going to go in and just like crush, crush, crush and wreck face and anything like that. It's not very killy on its own, but that's not necessarily where its strength is, as we'll get to when we talk about its abilities. So as we scroll down the page, you'll see a few other things. There's Bladed Impact. Roll a dice if a Blood-Racked Shrine ends a charge move within 1 inch of an enemy. On a 2-up, the nearest enemy unit suffers D3 mortal wounds. That's pretty great, but I kind of view that as like an added bonus to a charge, right? I mean, it kind of makes up for some of the lackluster profiles above. It just does a lot more for you on that first turn when you get into combat. Now, we already covered the Blood-Racked Stare. We're going to move past that. And then there is this rule at the bottom, Aura of Agony. Blood-Racked Shrine emits an aura that racks enemies with waves of agony. Roll a dice for each enemy unit within 7 inches of any friendly Blood-Racked Shrines at the start of your hero phase. If the dice roll equals or beats the score listed on the damage table above, which we'll take a look at in a hot second, that unit suffers D3 mortal wounds as pure agony courses through them. So it starts on a 2-up, and it actually stays until they're about half dead. It stays at a pretty good rate, 2-up, 2-up, 3-up. So that's awesome. It does make you, I mean, she does stuff. She does stuff. She does damage to units that are immediately around her pretty well. The thing is, though, when you get into like keyword synergies and spells and that kind of stuff, she doesn't necessarily want to be in combat per se, but if goaded to be there, it can hold its own. Now, the Medusa on top is actually a spellcaster, and so you do get one spell. You get one spell in your hero phase and Unbind in your enemy hero phase. And her unique spell is Enfeebling Foe. Casting value 5, which is awesome. Low casting value, easy to get. Pick a unit within 18 inches of the caster, invisible to them, until your next hero phase. Subtract 1 from wound rolls for that unit in the combat phase. So this is where we start to get into those kinds of things that I talked about earlier, where their toughness is not reflected in their save statistic, because there are numerous ways of debuffing your enemy. And what that does is make these snake ladies and ladies in bikinis and all that kind of stuff far more resilient, not because they're heavily armored, but because you're really bad at hurting them, essentially. Though there is also ways of getting extra saves on top of that throughout the allegiance abilities and that kind of thing. But I want to focus on this spell lore because it's pretty great. I should say this specific spell. -1 to wound will drastically change things for a lot of different armies. All in all, this model is cool looking. It's a huge presence on the battlefield. I had trouble taking out the one that I had to fight, but at the same time, like, it's one of those things, it's like a late game missile to me. At least that's the way my opponents used it, where, you know, turn probably 3 or so after a lot of the combat has happened, if you just ram this thing down onto an objective or something like that, it's pretty brutal to dislodge at that point. Once kind of the inertia of a lot of armies' charges have been spent, to have the shrine come in, do some mortal wounds on the charge, do some mortal wounds just because you're near it with the Aura of Agony, and then it does all those attacks, which are not great by any means, really, but it can do them, you know, and then you pile the shooting attack on top of that. It's a great objective clearer, in my opinion. Now, with that out of the way, we're going to move into some of the lesser heroes that you get because you put the Medusa on top. That means that the Hag Queen, the Slaughter Queen, and the Avatar of Kane, which are all respectable heroes in their own right, are now models that are walking around the table on their own, not riding the shrine. So we'll dive into them next. Here we are at the Hag Queen. Now, I'm going to just say, for the next couple of heroes, the Hag Queen and the Slaughter Queen, what you see is not the same as what they can do. Okay, when I say that, I mean, when you buy the battle tome for these guys and you get some of the synergies and prayers and all that kind of stuff, they become infinitely more interesting, okay? But I don't cover those things a lot because they do change battle tome to battle tome, but I just want to let you know, if you see this and you're like, wow, I really like these models, I like the design, but they just don't seem to do much, there's much more going on with this army than what I could possibly present in a review of a singular product like this Start Collecting box. So, Movement of 6, wounds 5, got a 5 up save and 8 bravery. That's pretty standard for, what I call chump heroes, those just people on foot. She has a Blade of Kane, which is a 1-inch range, 4 attacks, 3s to hit, 4s to wound, -1 rend, and 1 damage. Weird that she has somehow more rend than like most of the things going on with the colossal war machine rolling around the board, but whatever. But you're not taking her for combat. You're taking her because of the abilities. She is a priestess of Kane down here on the left. In your hero phase, a Hag Queen can pray once. If she does, pick a prayer she knows and roll a dice. And again, there's a whole list of prayers within the battle tome as well. On a result of a 1, she's found unworthy and suffers a mortal wound. On a 2, nothing happens. On a 3 up, which is pretty likely, the prayer is successful and its effects take place. A Hag Queen knows the Rune of Kane and Touch of Death prayers. Now we're going to talk about this in this set. You actually get access to a 3rd prayer, but we'll cover that in a little bit. The Rune of Kane, the Hag Queen's Blade of Kane, has a damage characteristic of D3 instead of 1 to your next hero phase. Now that's not really all that amazing, I'll be honest with you, because even that same profile with D3, right, 3s to hit, 4s to wound, -1 rend, it's not incredible, but if you just need some like spot removal, meaning get 1 or 2 dudes off an objective, I would probably go for it just to make sure you had the extra oomph with those 4 attacks to clear them off. And the second one is Touch of Death. Pick a unit within 3 inches of this model and then hide a dice in one of your hands. Your opponent must pick a hand. If that hand is holding the dice, the unit you picked suffers D3 mortal wounds. I'll be super honest with you, I've never been a fan of the little side games about holding a dice behind your back. Never really liked it, but it is an effective tool to, put your opponent in a weird headspace. And her most defining ability is going to be the Witch Brew over here on the right. In your hero phase, you can pick a friendly Daughters of Kane unit within 3 inches of this model to drink Witch Brew. If you do, then until your next hero phase, you can reroll failed wound rolls for that unit's melee weapons, and you do not need to take battle shock tests for the unit. Now you see this used a lot because Witch Brew is a fantastic ability. Rerolling wounds and no battle shock is huge in an army where a lot of folks are really attracted to the the witch elves and the Sisters of Slaughter, where they have light armor, so they will evaporate if you don't support them at all. So no battle shock tests is awesome, but also that many attacks getting rerolled failed wounds is pretty baller, and that's kind of what makes Witch Brew so awesome. Now what I do like is that it just affects Daughters of Kane units, so it could be used for other heroes. She can use it on herself. You'd kind of not have a reason for the battle shock test, but whatever. You could use it on the Medusa, witch elves, whatever. So the versatility there is what I like about it. Moving into the next war scroll, we have the Slaughter Queen, who's sort of like an upgraded version of the Hag Queen. Okay, so let's pretend that she's, the captain and the Hag Queen is the lieutenant, sort of a thing, like, down below them or whatever. Anyway, so talking about Slaughter Queen here, we have a 6-inch move, 5 wounds, a 5 up save, and 9 bravery, pretty standard. Again, she's just a person on foot. And her weapons are the Blade of Kane, which is a 1-inch range, 4 attacks, 3s to hit, 4s to wound, -1 rend, and 1 damage. Very familiar to the profile we saw before, but she also comes bearing a Death Sword. 1-inch range, 3 attacks, 3s to hit, 3s to wound, -1 rend, and D3 damage. So out of the gate, much more killy than the other variant, although honestly, you probably don't want them in combat if I'm super honest with you. Looking at her abilities, she's also a Priestess of Kane. She can do 1 prayer, roll a die. On a 1, she gets hurt. On a 2, nothing happens. And she has access to a few different prayers, although honestly, 2 of them are very similar. So Rune of Kane, Slaughter Queen's Blade of Kane has a damage characteristic of D3 instead of 1. Again, we already saw that. Touch of Death is the exact same as before, where you hold the die and you make your opponent choose a hand. If they choose the hand with the die, the unit suffers D3 mortal wounds. But lastly, she has the Dance of Doom. Until your next hero phase, this model can be chosen to pile in and attack twice in the combat phase. Now, do keep in mind for newer players, that means that she can be chosen twice, but they don't happen back to back. It's not like she gets to attack twice immediately. You would choose her, she gets to attack, your opponent gets to choose something, and then it comes back to you and you can choose her again. Again, these videos are always for new folks in mind, so that's just something to kind of keep in your head when you're thinking about this. She also has the ability Pact of Blood. A Slaughter Queen can attempt to unbind one spell in the enemy hero phase as if it were a wizard. This is something we see quite a bit in Khorne armies where they can't necessarily cast spells, but they have some kind of power over the ethereal to shut them down, and that's pretty cool. Now, she is also the hero that comes with a command ability. There was not a command ability on the Medusa, there was not a command ability on the Hag Queen, but here is ours. We have Orgy of Slaughter. If this model is your general, you can use this command ability. If you do so, pick a friendly Daughters of Kane unit within 14 inches of this model. If that model is within 3 inches of an enemy unit, it can pile in an attack as if it were the combat phase. That's huge. Remember, this is now your hero phase, and if it's your turn, obviously it's your turn, it's your hero phase, they get to attack, and if they kill the unit, now they're free to move and charge and do it all over again later. Or if they're just really stuck in, attacking something twice is huge. Cannot overstate how big that is. All in all, the Slaughter Queen is a wonderful hero because not only does she buff herself in terms of, having the ability to pile an attack twice herself or, buffing up a weapon. Again, just like the Hag Queen, if you need to just kind of clear something off an objective, they can probably do that. But in addition to that, she makes literally anything else in your army better, like straight up. And that's pretty great. That's pretty dope. So we're going to move right now into what is a very interesting war scroll, and that is the Avatar of Kane. Probably one of the most unique war scrolls that Games Workshop's ever put out for this game. So he is functionally a statue, but he's a statue that you can bring to life. Okay, so I'm going to read through his stats, but kind of just put an asterisk next to all these. The real important thing here is down in the abilities. Okay, so 9-inch move, that's baller. That's fast for a guy who's, doing the Rio de Janeiro stand still and not moving. 9 wounds, so okay, 4 up save, but one of the best saves in the army, and a 10 bravery. Now for his missile weapon, he has a torrent of burning blood, 10-inch range, 6 attacks, 3s to hit, 3s to wound, -1 rend, and 1 damage. That's a pretty good gun, like straight up. In a faction that's not at all defined by ranged attacks, having that to just put a few wounds on something before you get into it is phenomenal. It has the potential to drop, so we were talking earlier about the Blood Rack Shrine, how it has that bracket where, you determine how many wounds something has, and then the stats changed based on that. This is the kind of attack that I look at that and I'm like, if I get lucky, I could probably bring that thing down a profile. Like straight up. And that's not, I don't think, unreasonable. A lot of the top profiles go down when you have between 0 and 3 wounds. So that's big. As for melee weapons, he has the Avatar of Kane's sword. 2-inch range, which is fantastic. 4 attacks, 3s to hit, 3s to wound, -2 rend, and 3 damage. That is a brutal attack. Could always use with more attacks, but remember, he is a Daughters of Kane unit, so if you do the pile in attack twice thing on him, he can use that huge Sword of the Gods twice. Now, I did say before that the abilities is kind of the defining thing about this model, and that's where there's some push and pull in terms of he's not all good. Wrath of Kane. If your army includes any avatars of Kane, friendly Daughters of Kane priests, which are the Hag Queen, Slaughter Queen, that kind of level of hero we've already talked about, you get 2 of these in the box, know the Wrath of Kane prayer in addition to any others on their war scroll, any prayers that they know. So again, just to clarify, so for example, like the Slaughter Queen, she has these 3 that she can do, plus unwritten is this Wrath of Kane one. Pick a friendly avatar of Kane on the battlefield until your next hero phase. It is now animated. See below, we'll talk about what that means. But the prayer works exactly the same. On a 1, they take a wound. On a 2, nothing happens. On a 3 up, Wrath of Kane would go off. So what does all this mean? Animated. The avatar of Kane cannot move, cannot shoot, and cannot be selected to fight unless a friendly Daughters of Kane priest used the Wrath of Kane prayer to animate it in your preceding hero phase. Even if this model has not been animated, it is still treated as a model in your army. with the exception that enemy units that begin their movement phase within 3 inches of it can either remain stationary or move normally. They do not have to retreat unless there is another enemy unit within 3 inches. So the dude has a baller stat line, but you have to try and attempt something to get him to work. Now, thankfully, from what I understand, because I don't play armies with prayers and that kind of stuff, my understanding is you can attempt to do a prayer more than once, unlike a spell. But correct me if I'm wrong in the chat, or not the chat, the comments down below. But the idea here is simply you have to do something to unlock his potential. Now, there are in the battle tome, like artifacts and all kind of stuff, ways to kind of manipulate the prayer roll, so you have a much better odds of doing it if you want to take him. The idea here, though, is that he is a beast that needs to be unleashed before he can truly walk the battlefield. I think he's a cool looking model. He adds a lot to the army in terms of just that rend, and the 3 damage is sweet. The only thing is, like, you have other prayers, and so there's other things you want your Hag Queens and Slaughter Queens to be doing besides, babysitting this dude to get him to move forward. And last up are the Blood Sisters. Blood Sisters are Medusa. These are the melee variant of what you get. This is the one that Chuck suggested because they are battle line, and I really do strongly suggest for new players, always go with the battle line option, just because, quite frankly, it helps you later on when it comes to list building. So, what are these? So they have an 8-inch move. These come on a big old 40 mil base. These are big. 2 wounds each, which is great. 5 up save and 8 bravery. They forego any kind of ranged option and instead have 2 melee weapons. The first one is the Heart Shard Glaive, 2-inch range, 3 attacks, 3s to hit, 3s to wound, -1 rend, and 1 damage. Now, I actually really, really like that profile. Again, all of these things have to be viewed in the context of, within just this box, you have ways of giving them, rerolls to wound through what is it called? The Blood Chalice or something like that. Witch Brew. I don't know why Chalice got stuck in my brain. But yeah, with the Witch Brew, and then you also have ways of getting them to pile in and attack twice in a given turn through the command ability Orgy of Slaughter. So, it's a great profile. 3 up, -1 rend, 1 damage is just super. And 2-inch range on these things means they can, all of the super thin chaff walls won't stop them from reaching over and tapping somebody on the other side. Now, as far as their abilities go, the real only one here to highlight, they all have a unit leader. She gets one to her hit rolls, but the real ability here is Turned to Crystal. It's important for the Crystal Touch melee weapon that we're going to talk about now, which is a 1-inch range, 1 attack each, 4 up to hit, and then it says each time you score a hit with a Crystal Touch, the target suffers 1 mortal wound. Now, this is a unique thing for a few reasons. One, you do actually have to hit them, so debuffs to hitting is going to be a huge deal for this unit. However, you don't have to wound them. You just have to hit. And that doesn't sound like much, but the truth is, anytime you can cut out a die roll, right? Because at this point, you're cutting out the wound roll for you, and you're cutting out the save roll for your opponent. That's 2. That's massive. Okay, so even though it's on a 4-up, the fact that you get so many options to try and get them to attack, like through Orgy of Slaughter, when you attack in your hero phase and that kind of thing, more opportunities means you are going to be doing mortal wounds. Now, it's not going to delete a huge unit. It's 1 attack per girl, and it's a 5-person unit. So they're not going to be devastating things with this ability, but they can, it just increases overall what they're good at. It also means, side note, that the Witch Brew won't affect that particular attack because it re-rolls wound rolls and you're not making one. You're just making a hit roll. So kind of keep that in mind. But for a basic battle line unit, if you wanted to lean towards Medusa, again, I think that's where the value of this box is. I mean, they're great. They're just a 5-man unit. You can sit on an objective. They can fight. Basically, all the buffs around them in this army make everything swing higher than its own weight class, which is really what kind of the theme of Daughters of Kane is. Okay, so let's try and put this all together. What does all this mean for the faction? Well, I'm going to give you a heads up. If you are interested in Daughters of Kane as an army, it is going to require a lot of purchases. It is a very expensive army to get into. And the reason I say that is, if you noticed, almost all the hero choices in this faction are bundled up in that Cauldron of Blood kit, no matter how you build it. And that's why I took so much time to explain, I got somebody else's opinion, and we walked through different scenarios about what, how you build it this way if you want this thing, another way if you want another thing, because if you're just starting and you build it one way that ends up not being the way you want to play, it sucks because it's an expensive kit to have to replace. That also, if you want to go with the Witch Elf side of things, they're a horde-based army, and it's $60 for 10 models. So like, they're not cheap. They're really not an easy army to get into, and I really do hope that GW revisits them, puts out more, hero blisters that are solo, they're not tied to the huge cauldron, just as options for new players. The counterpoint to that, though, and this is a huge positive, is that by buying this, you do have all access to your heroes. If you know what you want to do in terms of how you want the army to look, you can build exactly what you want, and you get all the options. You get a Hag Queen, you get a Slaughter Queen, you get a Medusa lady who can either be on the shrine or not. You do get a unit of Melusi who can be with bows or the melee version, or kit bash something in between. Personally, when it comes to value, based on what Chuck said and what I can find out about the faction through its various forums and that kind of stuff, if you are into the Melusi aesthetic, that is the gals either with the snake ladies with the bows or the spears, this is a fantastic box because those are things you're going to want to buy anyway. Like, straight up, they just are. You can buy 2 of these and you will build the cauldron different options, but you will still use both of those Melusi units. If you are somebody who wants to do a horde army of like the witch elves and that kind of stuff, honestly, I would probably suggest passing on this one. Just buy the cauldron by itself and use the excess money and throw it in the bank account so that you can save up for more and more witch elves, because again, they're pricey. They're $60 for 10 is why, quite frankly, I don't play this army. I was hoping there's gonna be some kind of deal or discount, but there's just not. And so it is what it is. It's a fantastic faction. It really is. I love the lore for Morathi. The witch elves are stellar. Their models hold up. Everything about it is awesome. But the way that they broke down the war scrolls based on one kit, the Cauldron of Blood, it really does limit what they can do as far as onboarding options, because that kit is so expensive, it makes up the vast majority of the value that you get from the Start Collecting box. So again, if you don't care about the Melusi, don't buy this. Just buy the Cauldron and put the money towards something else. And I pretty much said the same thing about Fire Slayers. All their hero, not all of them, but a lot of their hero options are based on who's riding the Magmandroth, and the other 2 you can put on foot. Very similar situation where it's like, you might just not want to buy the Start Collecting box, because once you have all those options, you don't need them. And there's pros and cons to having all the heroes involved in one kit. But, when everything else in the army is also expensive, it gets a little bit rough. So in short, if you want the Snake Ladies, this is the best box there is. Go for it. Go hog wild. If you don't, do whatever you want. I probably think there's better ways to get into the faction. But I always end these videos asking 2 basic questions, and that is, how do aesthetically these models fit into the faction? Like, are you going to be surprised by anything else? And then secondly, are you going to use these models once you start playing? So the first question, how do they fit in? How do they represent the army? They do a fantastic job. If you like blood and ladies in bikinis and weird mutants with like the Melusi and that kind of stuff, nothing you see in the rest of the Daughters of Kane faction is going to look like a radical departure from the things that you see here. So if you walk into a store and you're like, I want to play that army, you will love everything else in it. And that's always a win, because there are some of these collecting boxes where you're like, okay, you gave me these, but then everything else in the army is sort of a hard right turn. And this is a place where it totally wins. And as for the second question, are you going to use these models once you actually start playing Daughters of Kane? I mean, with the Cauldron, you can't say yes enough times, because all the configurations of that give you all the heroes in your army except for Morathi herself. So you're going to use every single thing. Now, you might not use the Melusi, and again, that's the kind of the linchpin of value that I think has been hammered home to me the more I've researched this box, is if you don't like them, things kind of change, the math changes. But if you do like them, or at least you want them to have in your collection, or for, kit bashing, or just painting because you like them, yeah, this box is phenomenal value. If you're just all about witch elves, you won't use the Melusi that much. You won't use the Medusa, who comes either on the shrine or separate. It's just, I think it loses a lot of its oomph. Now, when I did this video, like I said, I reached out to Chuck, who's a fantastic person and Daughters of Kane player, but I want to do this as well. With all of these Star Collecting Box videos, I always put this out there. If you are a player of this faction, I want your opinion. Go ahead in the comments down below and explain, the value of this box, how you would build it, and what you would suggest people would purchase afterwards, because like I said, this is a very expensive faction. It just is. And so having good information out there is really, really appreciated. I always pin the most helpful comments up at the top here. As long as you keep it clean and you just try to help other people find out something that will make them happy as far as helping them pick the right faction, I'll be happy to pin your comment and point people towards you. So thank you all so much. I look forward to seeing your responses. Let me know your thoughts on the box, and I'll catch you in my next video here. Happy wargaming. Hey everybody, I hope you enjoyed that video. It was made possible by the folks over here to the left. These are my top supporters over here on YouTube and on Patreon that keep this channel going. If you'd like to learn more about how to become a supporter and get some cool things in the process, like exclusive pictures and interactions with me, and get your questions answered here on the channel, go ahead and click any of the links down below or the join button on the community page over on YouTube. Regardless of your choice, I wanted to thank you so much for joining me with this video, and I look forward to seeing you in my next one. Happy wargaming.